In this clip we're going to be looking at the trial of Verres in 70 BC, Verres versus Cicero. We know that already quite a bit's happened to Cicero in his career. He successfully defended Roscius in 80 BC on that trial on that charge of parricide. In addition to that, remember, Cicero's had to leave Rome to avoid the wrath of Sulla, so he's gone to Greece. In the meantime, Sulla's died, Cicero returns. We know that he's elected to the quaestorship for Sicily in 76 BC. Now, importantly, we've got to remember that Cicero's quaestorship is a resounding success. He's totally seen as a completely awesome quaestor. The reason why he's seen as particularly awesome is because he improves the grain supply to Rome without sort of pressuring the Sicilians. There's none of that sort of typically Roman extortion going on. The Sicilians respect him. Check him out here, rediscovering rather the tomb of Archimedes. So the Sicilians kind of respect him. He's seen as a decent guy. He's also got that reputation of a man of principle from the Roscius trial, and obviously he's a really awesome lawyer. So if the Sicilians are ever going to be in a pickle at any point, Cicero, because of his quaestorship in Sicily, is clearly going to be the first choice lawyer for any Sicilians. Now, in the meantime, after Cicero's quaestorship is finished, the Sicilians do get a particularly nasty governor, and that's Gaius Verres, who's governor of Sicily for 74 until 71 BC. Now, once Verres leaves, after his protection of Imperium sort of disappears, the Sicilians ask Cicero to prosecute Verres around about 71-70 BC. Cicero obviously agrees. Now, just to put it into a little bit of context, remember 70 BC, Pompey and Crassus have been elected as consuls and have started to break down and attack Sulla's laws that have brought them into direct conflict with the Senate. So, in a nutshell, what's happened? Trial of Verres is going to be 70 BC. The trial's scheduled for around about the August time after, around about the elections. It's in the extortion court in Rome. Now, what about the situation in Rome? Cicero, in his speech against Verres, calls it a dangerous crisis. But is it? Well, so far, remember, we already know Pompey and Crassus have attacked the Senate's power by reversing Sulla's reforms. So things like the tribunate, for instance, have been who'd been muzzled under Sulla. They're allowed their vetoes and stuff. In addition, Rome's mega crowded at this particular point. There's loads of people in for elections, Pompey's games as well. So Rome is heaving at this particular moment, and there is quite a bit of resentment that's going on with the courts. They're widely viewed as corrupt. Just before Verres' trial, two obviously guilty governors had been acquitted. So Cicero sort of says this is all like a big pot that's bubbling up and bubbling up. But is it really a dangerous crisis? Were Verres' actions as a dodgy governor kind of typical? And also, did Cicero exaggerate Verres' crimes? Well, in order to prosecute Verres for extortion on behalf of the Sicilians, Cicero faces lots of problems. Remember, the trial is due to start in that summertime in 70 BC. First problem is obviously Verres, who he is. He's a wealthy patrician, he's got loads of connections, he's got a lot of wealth, mainly from nicking it from Sicily, so he's going to use that for general bribery and corruption and stuff. Verres, as a wealthy patrician, has got lots of important mates, particularly a chap called Metellus. Now, Metellus is kind of handy to have as a best mate because he's just been elected as consul for the next year. Remember, the elections have happened in advance. Metellus isn't due to start his job until January. In addition, Metellus' brother has just been given the governorship of Sicily, so he could possibly stop witnesses travelling, cause a bit of a problem for Cicero collecting evidence. Knock on top of that, Metellus' brother number 2 has just been elected as praetor and president of the court in January. So really, Metellus' connections are going to really help out Verres. Verres ain't going to take any chances, and what he does is he appoints pretty much the most awesome orator at that particular point, a guy called Hortensius, who again, coincidentally, has also been elected as consul for the next year. So again, the odds are further stacked against Cicero. And then finally, remember, who really decides if someone's guilty during a court case? It's the jury. And the jury is made up of senators who are likely to be lenient to Verres. So bearing in mind that the trial is due to start in the summertime, Metellus and his mates aren't due to start their jobs until January. Hortensius, consul in January as well. You can pretty much sort of sum up that Verres' tactics are all going to be based around delaying the trial, whereas Cicero's tactics are all going to be about speeding the trial up. What about Verres' tactics? They're all going to, when we read against Verres, they're sneaky as, aren't they? But the important point to remember is we only know about those tactics because Cicero told us about them in his speech. So does that make it a little bit questionable? What are Verres' tactics according to Cicero? Remember, Cicero tells us that Verres set many traps against him, that Verres bought the date of his own trial, that he had tried to get a false prosecutor, a chap called Niger, to launch the case against him. Cicero heroically had foiled it. His mate Metellus had directly threatened the Sicilians, talking about his connections and saying that Verres would come to no harm. Remember, rather awesomely, they tried to occupy the court with the court case of the governor of Achaia. Is it a fake case, though? The governor of Achaia is given 108 days to collect evidence, never leaves Italy, possibly fake. And Verres, remember, had been congratulated by a chap called Curio because Hortensius had been elected as consul, Metellus' brother had been elected as praetor, and it looked like Verres was going to get off. So how's Cicero going to deal with all this stuff? Well, Cicero decides that he's got to obviously speed the whole trial up. He presents the case immediately whilst Rome's busy so he can get maximum publicity. He calls all of his witnesses at once, so he changes the format. He put the pressure in his speech on Verres' boasting and tactics. We'll talk about that in a sec. He's going to put a lot of pressure on the jury and the judge in his speech as well. So he's going to put those guys under a fair bit of pressure with what he says. As to what he actually says in his speech, let's have a little look at that. Cicero accuses Verres of using Sicilian money to block his election as aedile. He attacks the whole of Verres' career, not just for the charge that he's been accused of. He paints this vast, elaborate picture of a conspiracy against the Roman people, and talking about the dangers that face Rome and the whole world because of this particular case. A beautiful example of hyperbole. And he also attacks Verres' boasting routinely. Remember, Verres makes that very famous boast about his first year's profits, his second year's profits, and his third year's profits, and how he's going to use them. Rather importantly, just to really get a lid and get a real handle of that hyperbole, obviously there are those killer quotes from Cicero's against Verres speech as well. This one, for instance, is talking about the crisis in Rome. A grave crisis. Even the worst criminal will never be convicted provided he's got the money. Check out the pressure put on the jury. Again, check out the pressure put on Glabrio here. Verres has set many traps. He wants to snare myself, yourselves, Glabrio, the Roman people, its allies, other nations, everything the Senate stands for. And then this is an absolute total killer one, the pressure on the jury. Here is the man, here is the case that will provide an answer to this question: will a court of senators convict a guilty man if he is rich? Spoiler, Verres is found guilty. He's exiled. Hortensius doesn't even attempt a defense speech. Cicero, again, just like the trial of Roscius, he's viewed as a man of principle, someone who will stand up for what's right. Remember, the Lex Aurelia is passed pretty much shortly after, maybe already proposed, but certainly Cicero's prosecution of Verres is seen to influence it. The idea that jury duty would be shared between the equites and the Senate, so Concordia Ordinum in action. He's seen as a defender of the Senate, even though he's been putting a lot of pressure on the senators in the jury, but also support the equites, bring Rome together. The Sicilians are obviously clearly high-fiving Cicero. They provide him grain to put on a successful aedileship, and that really gives Cicero a platform to really go for the further offices of the praetorship and the consulship.